This most recent season of Stranger Things, I think, has caught everyone off guard with how good it is. At least, comparatively. Personally, I think Season 4 has dragged out quite a bit, and the episodes haven't needed to be as long as they are. But the story is tight, the presentation is stellar, and I think it's the best season since the first. But this show in general has been all over the place, from its humble beginnings, to this, to this. While I do think the show has found its footing in this recent outing, I thought it'd be nice to look back at the show, and the missed opportunities I think it had to stamp in a stronger legacy for itself, but also to look at the things the show has done really well. With that, I'm referring to the overall premise of the show, and how I feel it'd be better if it told its stories as an anthology. This is really throwing me onto my own hot seat, and I'm sure plenty of you will disagree with me, but with the show relevant right now, I just kinda want to talk about it. The first season of this show was real lightning in a bottle. It had its ups and downs, but knew exactly what it was. An homage and love letter to the 80s, and it did it really well. The kids are all fun and incredibly entertaining. Characters like Steve from the get-go stand apart from the annoying boyfriend-bully tropes of the time. Hopper is a fun piece of shit cop who you end up loving, and seeing Winona Ryder fit perfectly back into her slot like in her earlier work is a blessing. What stood out to me though was just the presence of this show. It's aesthetic, not only old school, but old school reframed for now. And oh my, the music. The theme is incredibly overplayed, and I feel like the entire rest of the score has been shoved to the wayside, but it continues to be relevant and interesting and some of my favourite stuff from the last few years. I'm not even a horror fan as it is, but the show rides the line between scary yet warm, not gory but still disgusting. The Demogorgon is a fascinating and horrifying creature, and the espionage aspects of Cold War hysteria root the story in these old nostalgic ways, while still trying to tell a fresh and satisfying tale. But then the show tries to do it again and again. Season 2 had some stuff I really enjoyed. The last 2 episodes were incredibly exciting, and damn, I remember that thriller trailer really driving up the excitement for me. Steve was awesome, and honestly, Bob was a highlight too. But the show was just more of the same. The characters don't go anywhere, swapping out a big bad for just a bunch of smaller bads, introducing characters like Max and Billy who kind of do nothing, and resorting to the conclusion that 11 is just gonna scream to win again. I'm not gonna talk about that other episode. Season 3 changes up the aesthetic a bit, and I appreciate the reinterpretations of older classics like Terminator and The Thing, but I kept coming back to these characters, and how I felt like the story seemed to be getting smaller as it expanded, with the cast just retreading water, and the story not being able to stray too far because it has to keep to this town and the characters in it. Billy in particular suffers, and the small bit of development he had at the end of the second season just completely disappears in favour of him getting a generic redemption arc at the end of this season. With that said though, I think the handling of Max in Season 4 more than makes up for this, and that scene in Episode 4 of Season 4 is honestly one of the highlights of the entire show. So, why would I prefer to make this an anthology, you ask? We've been blessed with a few good anthologies throughout the years, but, they've all had their various ups and downs. American Horror Story, True Detective, The Terror, and Fargo all have had excellent and less than excellent seasons. Yet, it was Love, Death and Robots that tipped that medium over the edge for me, and made me fall in love with the potential of it. That show leans in a bit further to the anthology shtick, with every episode being standalone, as opposed to season long. And while it also has some better and worse moments, the fact we're able to explore these fascinating worlds and intriguing characters more than justifies the odd stinker, And I think that's why these sit so close to my heart. Seeing different attempts to explore a general theme allows some amazing creativity when it comes to storytelling. Honestly, and this is going to be such a me answer, I feel like Star Wars The Clone Wars also elevated anthologies for me. While that show certainly had its episodes that reflected its much younger audience, I love seeing the show be able to step away from the main cast to highlight points of interest throughout the galaxy without bogging it down by shoehorning the main cast into every episode. And if that meant for every Rookies we had a Jar Jar episode, I think I'll take it. Anthologies have a special place in storytelling, and this extends beyond TV. Film, books, video games all use this tool set to not restrict themselves. Yes, we like following our favourite characters and seeing them grow, but sometimes there is just a comfortable place for those stories to end, or at least go on a bit of a hiatus. A lot of HBO shows in fact have attempted to ride this line between the two ends, with shows like The Wire and Game of Thrones not letting plot lines linger on any more than they should, and devoting the time to stories that should be a focus. Well, maybe they didn't successfully do it all the time, but taking a step outside the norm to explore a smaller story with big ramifications or world building potential really adds a sense of scale and depth that you wouldn't get otherwise. The Expanse is another notable example, bringing characters to the front and then the back as needed. The show attempts to merge with more traditional multi-POV storytelling, but still, I respect its ability to leave characters alone. Yes, audiences like having characters to attach themselves to, but if we can still learn something from Game of Thrones, it's that even the minor characters can be as interesting as the protagonists. Now, this isn't to say Stranger Things isn't bringing on board my hypothetical suggestions anyway. I think Season 3 and 4 at the very least have both tried to handle the subject matter a lot differently from each other. 3 with its The Thing and Terminator vibe going on, and 4 going full horror in parts with a Nightmare on Elm Street gig. However, again, I think the characters hold this show back. Because this show has to weave everything together, the show continually has to build to something, and I feel like in order to preserve the show's own sense of tension, it has to stop and start every season, even when the ultimate thing they're fighting is kinda just a variation of the same thing. I think Season 4 has preserved that somewhat with its Russian plotline, at least transferring some of the intrigue and momentum between seasons, but the character roster continues to grow with nowhere for them to go. This latest season doubles down on the formula of mixing up the groups of characters but not doing anything interesting with them, with characters like Will and Mike just fading into the background. I have to admit that the show isn't trying to break all these boundaries, and the characters do a great job of actually snuggling into this story, but with an anthology, you'd at least be able to have a go with something else, rather than continuing to keep these characters around because they were in the last season. So with that, imagine all the possibilities that exist if you approach each season with a clean slate. You could have a sci-fi alien plotline, a magical demon arc in another season, or just straight T-1000 in another. While I'd personally keep these to separate universes, I suppose, you wouldn't have to. Have Steve or Hopper or Eleven cross over into another season where relevant. Want to have a season that doesn't focus on a set of D&D playing kids? Go for it. Imagine the serial killer Nightmare on Elm Street plotline, but not confined to the larger story, and one where you can kill off as many people as you want. Imagine this harsh, brutal, Cold War Russian aesthetic with the Thing influences from Season 3, without it having to loop back round to Hawkins in some way. I know the worst of the show so far was when they crammed in an attempt at setting up a spin-off, and yeah, that didn't work. But that was because it tried to grow threads off this tight-knit story. Because at its core, these stories work really well on a small scale. Judging by the way Season 1 ends, they've always intended to continue to build off each season previous, but I think that was a wasted opportunity to explore the far reaches of this idea before it burnt out. I admit, it is hard to keep audiences coming back when characters dip so often, but I think I'm speaking more to them, to be honest, and allowing these stories to craft themselves, rather than us being so transfixed by what has been normal I think the success of something like Love, Death and Robots has proved we are eager to see more experimentation. I love this show. It's always been one of the things I keep coming back to Netflix for, especially as the quality of the rest of their stuff begins to drastically reduce. But I can't help but feel like Stranger Things has this unspoken, untapped potential that it never really allowed itself to grasp firm. In saying everything I have, I understand the show might have a different outlook, which I completely understand and respect. What the show has now isn't bad, and it's never tried to be anything more than what it is. That in itself is refreshing, as the show doesn't need to be anything more. With that said though, I think not delving into the anthology idea has limited this show in scope and depth. Who knows, maybe one day another show will pick up the reins from where we left off. Yeah, I've been on a bit of a hiatus. There's been a rather large project I've been working on for this channel that is taking a lot more time than I feasibly have, so in the meantime, I'll treat you to these sporadic ideas as I come up with them. Yeah, chat to you later.